Peace. Let me know if y'all can hear me clear. If you're in the chat, just let me know if y'all can hear me. Peace. Excellent. I just wanted to check in with y'all. Peace, y'all. Peace, True Journey. Y'all know every now and then I randomly come on just to check in, let y'all know how everything's going. If you keep up with my social media, you see that I'm always out and about doing something. And it's crazy because I would say over the last 6 months, my consciousness has shifted quite a bit in terms of all right, Gina. In terms of my investment in terms of talking. And it's crazy because the more that I do, the less compelled that I feel to even talk. And I've been like that for some time. But I would say even more recently, I'm even less compelled to talk, particularly to adults, I would say. One of the things that I've built about in the past and I've consistently built about is how when you look at technology and exponential growth, especially how we see nowadays with the introduction of AI and the use of that technology. Whenever you see technological so-called advances, that grows exponentially. Think about how quickly you receive updates with your iPhone, or how a new iPhone comes out that's much more progressive or advanced than the last one, and how quickly that technological advances takes us into different spaces in terms of access and ability. That's just speaking about cell phone technology, right? You think about the different apps that are created. I was looking at this app that uses AI technology, and I mean, it's crazy the type of capabilities that we see today. And here's the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand. When you look at technological growth, or you look at the advancements with different type of apps and the way in which technology is used, especially with the introduction of AI, that exponential growth is very different than the linear growth of the legal landscape. Now, what do I mean by that? The type of technology that is being created, there are not even certain laws on the books yet to limit or to restrict or regulate that technology. Because in terms of the legal landscape, you usually don't have the same type of computer programming minds, or the people who are creating technology or coding. That particular segment of our population is usually not a part of the legal landscape. When you look at the average age of our Congress members, they're not younger people creating apps and developing technology or working in the realm of artificial intelligence. That's a totally different demographic. And that's just talking about Congress members. When you consider the legal landscape or the laws where you live locally, you consider them regionally or on a state level, and then also on a federal level, there are not any laws that actually exist right now that are capable of regulating technology that is more advanced than the laws. Let me give you another example. One of the biggest challenges that's going on right now is in terms of trademarking or intellectual property. Some of you might be familiar with seeing artificial intelligence or AI being used to simulate the voice of some artists that may not even be physically here anymore and create entirely new songs that could be monetized using the voice of an artist that doesn't even exist or that may exist right now. And there is no way of, in terms of intellectual property, that people are able to claim the rights to that voice. You're not trademarking a voice because there is not anything within the parameters of the legal landscape yet that allows people to do that. You can trademark symbols and you can trademark phrases, you can trademark a lot of different things. But in terms of a voice, so think about how, when you look at a legal landscape, this is how it usually happens. If technology is created and then an issue occurs, like right now, the issue with, okay, how can we appropriately define intellectual property when someone is using technology in order to simulate the voice of someone that is not actually their property? It's a voice. Things have to actually happen first in order for laws to be written, which is a reactionary way in order to address something. Not in a legal context. People can say that, oh, that is kind of like image and likeness, but that's not trademarked. So somebody can take your voice right now and create a whole album with your voice. You can say that's your image and likeness, but what legal grounds do you have in order to define that as your intellectual property? So the laws of the legal landscape has not fully addressed that right now. That has not been legally addressed. So the more that technology advances, the laws lag behind because the laws have not even been written in order to address something that is futuristic or something that doesn't exist. Does that make sense to everybody? So here's what ends up happening. An issue occurs or something happens, and now laws have to be written in order to address something that it did not foresee, which means that usually when a law is created to address something that it did not foresee, that law is either going to be extreme on one side or it's going to be lax on the other side. There's no way to create a law that represents medium or something that is fair because that situation never even existed before. So how could you even really define what would be a fair or equitable way to address that scenario or situation? It's either going to be extremely harsh or it's going to be extremely lax. And then based upon it being extremely harsh or extremely lax, other scenarios have to occur in order for laws to be equitable or to be a medium in order to actually address it. So the faster that technology advances, the laws lag behind. And when the laws lag behind, it creates this space for people to be able to manipulate or to do things that cannot be addressed in a legal context. Let me give you another example. When you look at the legalization of marijuana on a state level, right? And the state striving to regulate it and hand out licenses for growers or for distributors or for all of these different aspects of that industry, you also find people that create loopholes. So they may do stuff like, well, it's kind of it's legal to possess it. You can't, but we can't really sell it out of our store. So what we'll do is we'll sell a stamp or a sticker and we'll price that sticker at the same price it would be for, a certain amount of marijuana. And you just buy the sticker or this stamp, and then I'll give you some marijuana because I'm not really selling marijuana. I'm just giving it to you, right? So laws have not been created yet to actually address that. And that's how it happens with everything. It always creates room in order for people to maneuver, in order for laws to actually eventually be written. And here's the thing, once the laws are written and on the books to address that scenario because of the advancement of technology, they're already on to the next step because technology grows exponentially. Laws grow in a linear fashion. So they're always behind. They're always behind. And here's the thing, those people who represent the most marginalized communities or those who are on the fringes of society get hit the hardest from that scenario because most of the times people who are marginalized or who are on the fringes of society don't have equal or equitable access to the technology, which means they're not riding an exponential wave. You have other segments of the population who are. Most people who are marginalized or on the fringes of society are growing linear, which means they are usually caught in the crosshairs or caught in the middle of the legal landscape, which is being created in real time to address technology, which is always steps ahead. So, in other words, the people who have the access, the people who have the resources, the people who have the finances, they're always able to maneuver and to find a way to navigate around this legal landscape because they are usually riding that exponential wave of technology. People who don't have the finances or the resources or the access usually they don't have the capability to navigate in that way. That's one reason why you see a lot more people who are so-called poor or underclass, as Shaborn was saying, who are usually caught up in that legal system, who pay the extreme price of the laws that are now being created on the books to address something while other people are just maneuvering around it. So it's crazy, you know? Um, So one of the things, I mean, that I've always been aware of and that I strive to do is to stay at the forefront of these changes within society, especially looking at the exponential growth of technology, how it can be utilized in a limited way, but always keeping my feet on the ground and connected to the everyday people who don't have access to that. And watching that relationship between the legal landscape or laws with the growth of technology. Now, one of the things that I taught myself during the pandemic is how to patent ideas as well as how to trademark intellectual property. And this was prior to the explosion of cryptocurrency and NFTs. And because I was in the position in terms of being at the forefront of this change in the landscape, I was successfully able to obtain certain intellectual properties to protect it as this landscape changes. So I think it was 2021, there was over a 400% growth in trademarks being filed at the United States Patent and Trademark Office related to NFTs. Over a 400% growth because people begin to understand, like, yo, we are now transitioning out of just a social media era or age and an intellectual property age. One of the other things that shifted in terms of the technology is when the shutdown happened, Hollywood or also the film and television industry shut down. And if you paid attention, you also realized that without the production companies, without these houses producing content, people also were not going to the theaters. Theaters were shut down. People were out of work. One thing you also begin to notice is you started to see these streaming services or these streaming networks starting to develop. Netflix was front and center. Then you've seen other ones like Hulu and Peacock and Stars and all of these other streaming networks. So, with the development of these streaming services and streaming networks, we transitioned into an IP era. And that is the era that we are currently in. Most people have no clue and don't understand this. We are in an intellectual property era. So, with the growth of these streaming services, now you started to see people, content producers, harvesting content the exact same way that people harvest organs. The same way you see a black market of people are organ harvesting, you started to see content harvesting. And because most people don't realize that we are in an IP or in an intellectual property era, they don't realize that people are now in positions where all they do is just take content. Any idea that you have is considered intellectual property. Any idea. It doesn't even have to be written down. Your idea is intellectual property. Now, if you just pay attention to comedians always talk about other comedians stealing jokes and ideas. Or you see people who had certain ideas and now you have somebody developing those ideas into a series or a web series or other different things, because people don't realize that their property is their ideas, their intellectual property. And if you don't protect that, people are going to harvest it just like they harvest organs. Because with the proliferation of these streaming networks, they need content to survive. They need content to survive. And most of the people who are in these positions that are producing the content are not the ones who have the actual ideas. They harvest those ideas from everyday people. People who post these very profound thoughts or ideas on social media, using their social media as a journal or as a blackboard, and people just taking it off there and creating albums based upon ideas, artworks based upon their ideas, web series or documentaries based upon their ideas. Yup. And that's what people, if, and that's what I've been doing for years, Herb. That's what people may not pay attention to. You never hear me saying what I'm going to do. I rarely say that. And if I do say it, it's already done. There's nothing that you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. I'm not sharing my ideas with people because I understand the value of my intellectual property. I've been in discussions with production companies related to things that I do, and you can't imagine the type of contracts that some of these people strive to send me. Straight disrespectful. But if I was ignorant, I would just sign certain things and give up my ideas. I cannot stress this enough. We are in an IP era. We are in an intellectual property era. You can actually share your idea, and someone can take that and create something entirely different based upon that idea. And you have to be able to protect it. So that's where patents come into play. That's where copyrights come into play. And that's where trademarks come into play. Now, I'm going to share something that some of you may not be aware of. Um, a couple of years ago, the universal flag of my nation, of the 5%, I took the initiative to trademark the elements of the flag. The elements of the flag. Now, most people who don't have a background in studying law and don't understand the difference between a trademark, a copyright, or a patent did not understand why I did that. By law, you cannot trademark a flag of a nation, but you can trademark elements of that flag, or you could incorporate aspects of that flag in a trademark. So, for example, you cannot trademark the flag of the United States, but you can trademark a picture of a horse stylized with some of the elements of the American flag and trademark that, but you cannot trademark the flag of America. And you can't trademark any flag of any nation. So what I did is I saw that not only was our universal flag being used in the public domain the wrong way and people utilizing it for financial purposes, but a way in which you can control that in the public domain is to create it as intellectual property. So, in other words, you won't see anyone wearing Nikes in film, in television, in commercials, in anything unless they get permission legally from Nike. And if they do get permission from Nike, they have to sign a license agreement. And Nike has creative control on how that trademark is going to be depicted in film, television, ads, or anything else. They control it. It's their intellectual property. So me thinking forward, I trademarked elements of our universal flag. Some people understood it. Some people were completely against it and felt that it was disrespectful and offensive for me to be able to do that. And to be clear, I didn't do it for myself. I did it and called a committee of people together and told them directly, I am doing this to transfer ownership to you so that we can control it collectively. And some people didn't want that. They didn't want that responsibility. They really didn't understand what that meant. And I can understand that. But my position was, why don't you own it as intellectual property first and then figure it out later, as opposed to still not understanding why you have no control over how you're depicted in the public domain, or how Walmart can sell this for 300 and something dollars online and you have no control over it, or how people can put it in newspaper articles, or Nas can put it in his documentary about the Supreme Team and none of y'all have no control over it at all. You can't say nothing about it. So instead of me having a conversation with people about, okay, this is important to do it, I just put my own money up and did it and had the registered trademark and said, here, I want a group of y'all to come together so that I can transfer ownership to y'all so you can have it and control this. That's my gift to all of us. And some people didn't want it. Some people did not understand that move. But unfortunately, some people are going to continuously learn as we move forward into the generations further from here. And as technology continuously grows, they're going to have to bear witness to the fact that when they had an opportunity to control the intellectual property of our identity, they didn't take advantage of that opportunity. Now anybody can. And I can live with that. I can live with the fact that I did what I felt and what I thought was of value to all of us, and that some people just did not have the vision to foresee this. So things are not going backwards. The further we go into the future, the more we're going to see people striving to control their intellectual property or their IP. And if you're not in a position to be able to do that, then uh, people are going to be able to do whatever they want. Think about maybe a couple of years ago when Kanye West came out, wearing, I think it said "White Lives Matter." Those shirts that he came out with, he didn't even trademark it before he did that. So soon as he came out with it, two brothers that own a radio station in the South somewhere went and trademarked that phrase And then once they trademarked it, they transferred ownership of the trademark to um, some group who were advocating against what Kanye West was doing. And that's the reason why you saw Kanye West promote that brand for a short period of time, and then he just simply dropped it because he didn't own it. He didn't own it. And that was the exact same type of position that I was striving to put us in terms of, my family and my nation. That if people want to use this, they're going to have to license it to us. They can't just use any of the elements of what we say we represent in the public domain and make money off of it. They can't do it by law. But then there were some people who rationalized, hey, people ain't really making money off of it. It don't matter. Even when I showed them many different examples of how it's being used in the public domain, including newspaper articles demonizing who we are as a nation. People act like they didn't even want to acknowledge that. Then you have people saying, what elders did you talk to first to get permission? And a lot of different responses. Yup, that's why they didn't use the real flag in the Wu-Tang Saga. Yup, because before they even did the Wu-Tang Saga, RZA being the executive producer or the creative mind behind that, he didn't use it because number one, he would have got a lot of negative backlash. So Papa Wu is the one that actually created that version of it for the Wu-Tang Saga. Now, if we were in position the way that I put us in position to actually own that intellectual property, then RZA could have licensed the use of it for his Wu-Tang Saga series and would have to pay a fee to the nation or to the general body in order to utilize it. And we would have had creative control of how it is actually depicted. It wouldn't just be here's a license to use it. We would also have creative control over how it would be depicted in that series as well. Some people didn't want that control or that responsibility. Some people were arguing back and forth about who shouldn't and should be a part of the committee to control this intellectual property. So it got to the point where I had some people saying, yo, that was a brilliant idea to be able to do that for us. And I had other people on the other side, yo, you disrespectful, who you think you are, all this other stuff. And you had people on the side saying that. So it got to the point that I said, you know what? The only thing that I do see that we all agree on is that we don't agree. And since we all don't agree and we haven't come together for a common cause, some people see it as good, some people see it as bad. I'll just cancel it. And then now that all of you know for a fact that I have the capabilities of being able to do that for us, if any of you over here on this side ever get to the point where you understand the value and the importance of this, and you want to actually own this as intellectual property in the public domain, you know that I have the capability of doing it. So willfully, somewhere in the future, that could be something that is revisited. Because like I mentioned, we're not going backwards. We are not going backwards. And as we continuously move into the future, and we're having these conversations now about artificial intelligence, and it's still about intellectual property and IP, that's the only kind of conversations that we're having moving into the future. And if you don't own anything physically as well as intellectually, it's going to be very difficult to be able to control your destiny. You could actually trademark hashtags. Why would somebody be against legally owning what already belongs to them? Because what some people didn't understand is that they really legally don't own it. That's why Walmart can make necklaces with it on there, or anybody can make shirts, other different type of clothing or books or anything, put it in film, put it in television, and you can't say or do anything about it because you don't legally own it. Let me give you another example. The Washington football team, when they were coming up with ideas of what to actually name that franchise after dropping the Redskins name, there was a lawyer that lived in the DMV area, and years prior to that, he already trademarked probably a couple dozen varieties of a Washington name. I think he had the Washington he had a variety of different names. Washington I mean, so many different names that if the franchise wanted to choose a name that he already owned as intellectual property, they would have to negotiate that from him. Yup, Red Wolves and all of these other names. Warriors, yup. And if that franchise wanted to use one of those names that he already had, they would have to license that from him or he could sell it to them. There was no way around that. He owned the IP. Kobe Bryant, trademark Black Mamba. If he was up there using that and somebody hurried up and trademarked that, and he went and put it out and was using it and had it on sneakers and all this other stuff, he would have to cease and desist the use of it, or he would license it. He would have to license it to this person that owned it. And that person could have been a 14-year-old living in Boise, Idaho, but they owned that IP. This is what people don't understand. And like I said, I took the initiative because I was already ahead of the curve, like Herb is saying, already ahead of the curve in terms of striving to protect this. And that is an investment that a lot of people are not talking about. Check out some of, I say, Kevin Hart's interviews over the last couple years. He consistently talks about IP or intellectual property, and he knows the value and importance of it. But many of us are so far behind that we are writing ourselves out of the future because we're not properly positioned in ourselves. Joy, what I would say is if you want to get a sense of the cost to trademark something, um, do some research online and see how much it costs to do trademarks. Like I said, I taught myself to be able to do that. So are you saying that we really can't trademark the universal flag because we really don't own it? No one owns it legally. You cannot trademark any flag, but you can trademark the elements of that flag and how they are arranged. It's different. Like I said earlier, you cannot trademark the American flag because that is a flag of a nation. You cannot do that. You can trademark elements of that flag and use it as a stylized version. So, the example that I gave earlier, you can trademark a horse and use elements of the American flag on that horse. You can trademark that. But the flag itself, you cannot do that. What I did is I trademarked the elements of our universal flag and how they are arranged, which means no one had the legal right to utilize that flag in its current arrangement, nor could they use it in another arrangement using different colors. So, in other words, because I trademarked the elements of the flag, if somebody came out and and used different points and different colors and all of this other stuff, I could actually argue that in court that infringes upon our trademark because it could confuse people in terms of our brand and what we actually represent. Any trademark and copyright and patent attorney would confirm exactly what I'm saying. Yup, the difference between the polo logo and another horse image. Yup. But those who could not see the importance and the value of this move, they are now in a position where they're going to have to constantly watch how things constantly grow and progress into the future related to IP and intellectual property. And they had the opportunity to control it, but yet they chose not to because they couldn't see it. But also willfully people that experience this, and this happened maybe a couple of years ago, that people who didn't fully understand what was happening at the time, that they've invested some time in researching and learning more about what a trademark is, how it's different than copyrights or how it's different from a patent, the process, and is it a asset or is it a liability? Some of the people that understood what I was doing for us realized that it was an asset. Others thought that it was some kind of liability. But that's the era that we're in right now. Think about the dude that he was working at that car dealership. I forgot what his name is. Stop what process, Shyborn? I did it. It wasn't even I went through the entire process and did it. And when people didn't agree and come together for a common cause, I canceled it. So it was legally registered. And I called a group of us to get together in order for me to transfer ownership of that registered trademark. But people couldn't come together and for a common cause to say, yeah, I want to take responsibility for this and utilize it and to control our identity in the public domain. No, I didn't go to no law school, Mecca. This was at the time, right? shortly after the shutdown of the pandemic where people weren't even gathering. We were communicating this all virtually. So, like I said, I saw where things were going and I took the initiative to do that. I paid for it myself for us. People were offended because I didn't ask them did they want it. Some people were offended because I didn't talk to them about it first. My thought process was here, do something with it. We own it legally. And the funny thing about it, and it's not really funny, but shortly after this fiasco, and I canceled it, maybe 2 months after that, Nas released his Supreme Team documentary and had the universal flag all up in there. In one of those episodes, he was talking about the 5 percenters, had the universal flag front and center and everything else. And I literally spelled that out to people before that. Did an entire PowerPoint presentation and everything and explained to them no one will be able to use this in the public domain without our license approval. They would have to pay for our license use of it, and we would have creative control. Nas wouldn't have been able to even put that in his docu-series without coming to us first. He would have to pay in order to utilize that, and we would have creative control on how it's depicted in that series. This was 2 months after the fact. And I know some people were sitting there looking at that like, damn. And I just explained that to people, literally in a PowerPoint presentation, that this is what's going to happen. Just last week, I saw some toy company that just came out with action figures, and they had action figures of Eric B. and Rakim um, in their Paid in Full album. And I think that's the one where they were rocking the Dapper Dan outfits with the universal flag on the back. They're actually selling those figures right now. People can do what they want right now, Joy, because no one owns it, just like people didn't own it before. But if they would have kept control over what I created for us as IP, then no one would be able to use it. The same way nobody can't use no Nike uh, stuff. You can't put Nike on nothing. No one will be able to use it. But from that day forward, moving into the future, those who could not see it now have to live with it, that they had control over this, and now there's nothing that they can do. They have no way of protecting their identity in the public domain. So a lot of the things that I do, that's okay. They gonna have to live with that though. So a lot of the things that I do, just on the strength of my work, I strive to positively represent who we are, because there's a lot of negativity and a lot of propaganda about who the 5% are based upon the actions and the lifestyle of people that doesn't coincide with the culture. So there's a lot of things that I do that strives to set a righteous or a good example of who we are. I had some of the dumbest type of responses that I could even imagine. I had people saying, "Oh, we not under the government." You live in a city, in a society, and if you work, you get a paycheck and you pay taxes to the government. What are you talking about? So did you need the approval of others, or did you step down respectfully? There were two different factions really. Some were like, "Yo, I see what you're doing, and I'm thankful that you had the foresight to do that for us." But then you had other people on the other side who felt that I needed to get their personal approval and that I needed to ask certain people first whether we should do that. And the it kind of felt like I went and got $1 million and put it in a briefcase legally and came back to a group of people and handed it to them and said, "Yo, this is for us to build with. Here." Some people were thankful, like, "Yo, I really appreciate that." And then some people were like, "Who you asked before you gave us that $1 million? Who did you go through and how come you ain't asked this person that if we needed it? Who you think you are going to get that $1 million and handing it to us like that? I don't want that. It belongs that everybody should have that." I had some of the most ignorant responses. So what I did is I just took the suitcase and I went and put it right back where it was and said, "Oh, okay. Well, since y'all don't agree on what to do with this, let me just go put it back because I didn't do it for me anyway. I did it for us." Shortly after this, to this day, this happened a couple of years ago. There's still fundraisers going on, people striving to raise money to get the basement fixed over at the school, trying to raise money to build uh, a structure to put in the yard, trying to raise money to do this, trying to raise money to do that. And I'm like, I just showed y'all how to do this. I just showed y'all. And some of y'all didn't want the responsibility for this, or were arguing back and forth saying, "Yo, that person shouldn't use it," or "You can't trust this person and don't have that person involved." I'm like, "Yo, exactly, exactly, exactly. No one could have used it. No one." But people were just worried about who was gonna get it and who was gonna do this and who was gonna do that. I'm like, "Yo, I just helped put us in a perfect position, a perfect position." But some of y'all just dropped the ball and did not have the vision. And that really showed me that a lot of people are really comfortable sitting on a stoop, sitting in their neighborhoods, being a god or being a earth or just talking amongst themselves, but they really don't want anything. And they really don't want any kind of responsibility beyond them just hanging around their friends. Some of us are like that. And it's not just 5%. It's people like that that's Muslims or Christians or they got a metaphysical perspective of life. There's just many of our people who are content or apathetic about not really wanting anything or not really wanting any more responsibility beyond where they are at. And at the same time, they don't want other people to make certain type of moves that may put them in a position to be more responsible. Some people didn't like what I did because I did it. And I'm the only one that's ever did that in the history of our nation. And I guess they may have thought that, oh, he just probably wants some notoriety or be self-important because he did it, this, that, and the third. If that was what it was, I wouldn't have said nothing and I wouldn't even have called people together. I never even shared the actual registered trademark publicly. I have the actual sealed registered document and I've never shown it publicly. The people that I called together to be a part of this committee, I shared it with them and explained to them what it was and what kind of position that we're in and why I'm reaching out to them. But somehow people sharing it all online and posting it publicly and everything else, I never did that. I always kept it private because I understand the value and the power of intellectual property. Well, here's the thing, Shopborn. We don't have a hierarchy and there's no leaders. And that's an unfortunate thing about being able to check egos because sometimes people who are not qualified, just because they think that they're divine, they feel that they're qualified for any and everything. And they kind of look at it as they're lessening their value if they acknowledge the fact that they're not the best knower in the situation. But that experience really showed me that there's a reason why I just primarily focus on the youth, because dealing with a lot of adults where there's a lot of egos at our presence and it's self-importance, and sometimes people just do things for notoriety or to be seen and are not really doing anything in life. And you may be a person that's doing something and you come around them, peace born scientists, you come around them and they feel as if you expose their inadequacies or that you kind of put a spotlight on what it is they're not doing. You know, our annual show and prove that we have usually the second week in June to celebrate the Father, which is the single largest gathering of five percenters every year. I've done that years for years. And whenever I go to volunteer. I go to help out. I don't go and buy new clothes with labels on it and shit, get shades so I can stand around and look all important so people could be like, oh, that's him right there. Oh, yeah, yeah, that. Oh, yeah, yeah. Taking pictures with people and shit like that. I'm not that kind of person. I go and help out whichever way I can, and then I leave because usually the next day I have some other prior engagement. There's something else that I'm doing. I'm not hanging out. I ain't standing around trying to be smart and look like I'm wise and intelligent. I do what I do. But even in me just living that type of way and being who I am, some people are simply intimidated by that because I'm genuine. I don't put on no airs. I don't use $50 words that I don't use every damn day. I'm not materialistic. So I'm not buying whips so that you could look like, oh, he's successful or some shit. I don't care about none of that stuff. I just do the job. I just work. And that's very intimidating to some people who are not really genuine or about that work. Now, I haven't been on here, doing a live in a minute because I just really haven't had the desire to even talk like that, to build about certain things. And when I constantly see people just talking and running off at the mouth and they have nothing to show for what it is they're doing, that that is something that I don't know. It's I really don't have tolerance for that. People trying to build on mathematics, and there's nothing in their life that shows evidence that they know what that actually means. And I'm not saying you got to sit on here and just show everybody what you got, but a core part of this nation, a core part of why we even exist is because of the community advocacy and youth outreach that the father did. That is the core foundation to how our teachings even spread. Community advocacy and youth outreach. That's the foundation. I mean, we can get into all these other different type of professional spaces and do this and do that, but if you're not working within advocating within your community, if you're not doing any kind of service work or you're not working in your community or doing anything for others and you're not invested in any form of youth advocacy, then I don't know what a person is doing when they say that they live in this culture. I'm not interested in hanging out with a bunch of dudes and taking pictures with a bunch of dudes. I'm not interested in any of that. And hanging out with a bunch of dudes. Like, if I don't see children and women present, that's not real growth. If it's just a bunch of dudes just constantly hanging out, constantly just saying the same thing that they were saying last month, that is no evidence of growth. The only evidence of growth is where you have women and children who are present. You have to have women and children who are present. That is evidence of growth. And I'm not talking about rounding up women and children just to take a picture to look like it's growth. I'm talking about consistently working within your community where you are constantly around women and children. The only brothers that I'm even connected to are brothers that are doing the same type of work that I do in some capacity. You're not going to see me in a whole bunch of pictures hanging out with a bunch of dudes. And it's man, we really got to get a lot of things together in terms of moving into the future and being able to control our identity, really being self-determined. And I give all I have and do everything within my power to make sure that that's possible all of the time because I'm able to operate from a place of abundance. If I'm adding on and I'm doing things like I invested in creating intellectual property or doing a trademark of the elements of our flag for us, I didn't ask nobody for no money. I studied the law myself and did that and handed it to us. And some people didn't want it. Some people to this day is like, man, yo, you should have kept that. But hey, I didn't do it for me personally. So I never saw it as mine. I did it for us. And some of us didn't want that responsibility. I received death threats over that. People making videos striving to demean my name and all of this other stuff and gossiping about me. A whole bunch of bullshit came from behind that. Oh no, that's my grandfather clock or my grandmother clock. whatever way you see it. And I went through all of that stuff just to do something for us. Just to do something for us. But I really learned a lot in that experience. That some people are really just comfortable where they are. Some people fear success more than failure. And I do a lot of things that are completely fearless. Yeah, I've never had a public conversation about any of this either. Some people's response to me doing that was when I showed them screenshots of the universal flag being sold online at Walmart. They ain't really making that much money off of it anyway. It don't really matter. It ain't many people buying that. That was their response. I was like, oh my God, we are not there. We are not there. But yet we complain about people using mathematics or people saying this or putting this in their lyrics or all of this other stuff. We'll sit and complain about that, but yet don't want the legal responsibility to be able to check that shit. Peace, Divine. But willfully, some people may be inspired by the things that they see me do because I strive to create a path for others to come behind me that will do even greater things than me, realizing that you don't have to just be God on your stoop. You don't just have to be God in your neighborhood. You can be God anywhere and be just as confident as comfortable, whether you on a stoop or whether you in the boardroom. Why were those responses taken in consideration over those that supported you? It wasn't over those that supported me. My approach was a consensus. We need to come together for a common cause. That's what we say. Social means to advocate a society of men, or group of men and women for one common cause. Let's come together for a common cause. And when I saw that this was something that was very divisive, that I realized that the only thing that we really fully agree on collectively is that we all don't agree. That's the only thing we agreed on, that we all don't agree. So since we all don't agree, let me just put it right back. Let me cancel it. And then for those of you who don't have the foresight to see the value of this, maybe somewhere down the line, if it's not too late, you will understand the value of this. And I'm not looking for somebody to apologize or to be like, yo, I realize now what you were striving to do. I ain't looking for none of that. Just know that if y'all ever wanted to do this seriously in the future, you know for a fact that I have the knowledge to be able to do it because I'm the only one that's ever done it in the history of our nation. And then I had people coming out, yeah, yeah, I could have did that. Yeah, so and so could have did this and this, that. Nobody else did it. So 50 years from now, if this conversation comes up, hey, yo, was the universal flag ever trademarked? Yeah, he did it. Wow, what happened? Why did this go this way? Why did that go that way? Whatever. But for me, I just always strive to be an ambassador of who we are. And some people don't like that because in some ways it forces them to tighten up their belt or to step up and to be better than where they're at. It's kind of like going to somebody's house and they're ultra clean or they're very organized, right? And then you may not be that clean or you may not be that organized, and then they come and visit your house. You might be a little self conscious when they're at your house. I was in a relationship with a queen one time, and she was a professional housekeeper. That was her profession. She learned that. So things that I thought would be clean when she's around me, it's mad stuff that she would see. Now, that could have made me I could have been insecure about that. I could have been intimidated by that, or I could have been open to learn how to become even better at what it is that I was striving to do. And it's not often that people take that approach. It's not often that people take that approach. A lot of times the reaction that people have, they get offended. And then sometimes people come around to respond to things, but usually change is easier when it's on your terms. And even that's difficult a lot of times. When you're striving to change something, think about how challenging it is oftentimes for you to strive to change something and you're intentional about it. You're setting out to change some things, and that may be difficult, and you're doing it on your own terms. So think about how much more difficult it is what you just surprising people with change. You just bring it to people like, okay, now it's time to change. And sometimes our growth or the things that we do, that's how people react to it. That they got to change right then and there. And it's not on their terms. And that reaction that people have a lot of times may be violent. They may want to attack you because of that. Sometimes people may want to clown you about that. And the way that they deal with the discomfort of the change is they try to make it into a joke. Like it's not that serious. And then sometimes people just strive to ignore it. Like, let me just bury my head in the sand. I don't even want to deal with this shit. But rarely are people responsive to that, where they're open to that change and they reassess the things that they've learned and the experiences they've had already in life, where now they're trying to figure out how can I integrate this new knowledge into my life. It's uncomfortable, it's difficult, but I'm open to this. Rarely do people do that initially. Sometimes a person goes through all of those different phases first, those reactions, where they attack what's being presented to them, or they try to clown what's being presented to them, or they try to ignore what's being presented to them. And then sometime over time, they learn to respond like, yo, this is better for me. This is better for us. I got to change some things in order to integrate this into my life. Now, if we're dedicated to growth and development and always striving to be a resource to those who are around us and an example, The best position and posture is to be open and receptive. True indeed, divine. Cognitive dissonance. The best posture and response is to be open. And sometimes we got to fight through those feelings ourselves of just reacting to something, knowing that, yo, I got to be receptive to this. A couple of years ago when my brother got murdered, like shortly after that, I became like ultra sensitive to violence. Things that I would watch on TV or listen to prior to that, it wouldn't really phase me because I wasn't really connected to violence in that capacity. Once I experienced that, there's certain things I couldn't even watch on social media. I would have to immediately turn it off because I was very raw emotionally. There were things that I would see in fight videos or violence, and I could not. I mean, even to this day, I still have a challenge with exposing myself to like certain type of violence. And this happened right after my brother got murdered. And initially, it was very, very difficult to even expose myself to just different type of conversations or different type of visual things that had violent elements of it. It was difficult. I would just turn it off. I couldn't even expose myself to it. But I knew that in order for me to start unpacking and processing those feelings is I had to learn how to be open and receptive and explore why I was feeling that way. And it was probably maybe 5 or 6 months after it happened, and one of my friends sent me this, clip of this television show, excuse me, of couples talking about relationships, and I didn't think much of it. I put it on and I'm starting to watch it, and this is just 2 couples talking about their relationship and experiencing loss. They lost a child, you know what I'm saying? And they were having those conversations about their feelings and everything. And while I'm sitting here watching this video and listening to it, I start to feel myself wanting to turn it off. Like it was touching me in a very uh it was very raw, in terms of my feelings. And it was difficult just to hear them have this type of conversation about loss that they've experienced as a couple and how they move through that. And I wanted I went through a variety of different emotions just watching this. I felt sad, I felt hurt, I felt angry, and then having those feelings were also attached to thoughts. Those emotions were also attached to thoughts, part of self. So I started to think about my homegirl that shared it with me, and I started to be upset with her. Like, why would she send me something like this? And it wasn't anything that was very it wasn't vulgar or nothing like that. It wasn't nothing extreme. It wasn't even showing anything violent. It was just a older couple having a conversation about loss that they experienced in their relationship with the child and how that felt, the things that they went through. And that it bothered me so much that I wanted to just turn it off. But in having those type of emotions, it was mad difficult. But I sat through it and I pushed myself emotionally to just feel every single thing that I felt listening to this couple. and I explored why I was feeling that way. It was difficult to be able to do that. It was difficult. And even prior to that experience, I've been on a path for quite some time, just really striving to become more emotionally intelligent. Because for the most part, I'm a pretty laid back person. I oftentimes don't really allow people that deep into my private or personal world. I share love and I'm able to express myself. But for some time, I've really been striving to explore my emotions and my feelings. And that is a very difficult place to be in, particularly us as males and as men, because it challenges who we say and think that we are, as well as our capacity, our infinite potential. There's a lot of things that I do, and I mentioned earlier, in a fearless way because I'm really exploring those various different aspects of myself and my infinite potential. Next week, like I mentioned on my social media, I'm invited to be at the United Nations for this annual event that's going on, to participate in the event. Some people will be scared out of their mind to be at the United Nations. Like, what will I say? How should I dress? Stuff like that, don't fear. I have no fear of that. Or speaking in front of a room full of people, I have no fear of that. Some people are definitely afraid of doing that, or going certain places, or even sharing their feelings about certain things, being vulnerable in that way. You know, I've been on this journey for quite some time. And the evidence of all of the things that you see me do is rooted in a fearlessness. Some people are afraid of writing a book and putting it out publicly for people to critique it. I've done that numerous times. The work that I do in film and television, I love the documentary space because I'm not reading no script. I'm speaking directly from my heart and my head, and I'm writing what it is that I want to write. And I love the fact that people appreciate the fact that what I have to say and share is coming from a genuine place and is valuable. And that they would like to utilize that content to be able to share stories that can inspire, empower, and educate people. Some people are definitely afraid of being in front of the camera, or even people asking them certain questions on the spot and how they will respond. So there's a lot of things that I do that is rooted in a fearlessness that I strive to be able to inspire other people to be able to do. Some of us are comfortable being who we are just on our block, and that's cool. But those of us that are global or international, let us do what we do. Respect that that's the lane that we're in. I never set out to be, oh, I'm gonna be a public figure. I'm gonna be important. I'm gonna be this, I'm gonna be that. And that's why I don't come off like that, because I never had that intention to begin with. I literally have had to learn to take responsibility for just being in the public eye, and people reaching out to me every single day asking me questions about something, or asking for resources for something, or telling me how much they appreciate what it is that I do, or how this has affected their life, or how this has been something valuable to them. Every single day from around the world. I never set out to be like, yo, that's what I'm going to do. That's who I'm going to be. And it's funny because some people look at me and they think like, yo, if I was in that position, I would be doing this. Or they may think that because I'm in this position that I'm somehow not really being genuine and authentic about who I am. That I really secretly want a Lamborghini. That I really secretly want to be able to do this and do that, but I'm fake humble. It's funny as hell. People will try to project their ideas onto me and think that this ain't real. There's just so much that I would love to be able to teach some people if they were willing to listen and learn. So much. But I tell you, I really don't have the highest confidence in a lot of adults. Because when I look at this society, it's not a bunch of children who are creating all of these issues. All of these videos I be seeing online, and people always striving to give their expert opinion on relationships and how you need to do this and how you need to do that. It's like, these are not children. These are adults with all of these answers, and it's it's a lot of confusion. And I'm not interested in being involved in any of that. If people are interested in actually doing work in their community and being a change maker, not fronting, not acting like they doing something, but really doing something, that's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in doing a bunch of talking. It is crazy because when I first started vlogging or doing videos, I just was doing that because I had things to share. And oftentimes the things that I have to share are linked or related to things that I'm actually doing. So I'm never just sitting there talking about something. It's directly linked to what it is that I'm actually doing. But then as social media began to grow, and then we started to see the vlogging capability attached to some of these social media acts where now people can go live and they can do this and they can do that. It's saturated the digital landscape where now everybody feels as if they have something to say. And from my perspective, a lot of the things that I see people saying, that is not necessary. Not necessary at all. And because of that, I've become more and more less likely to want to talk or share because there's just a lot of people talking all of the time about nothing because they usually don't have nothing to show for what it is that they say. And that's just the reality of it. People do things backwards. It's kind of like you see a lot of people who are comedians and they especially gained some popularity during the shutdown of the pandemic because, again, like I mentioned earlier, these production houses shut down. So there weren't any studios producing and creating a whole bunch of content. And with the proliferation of these streaming networks who now have to harvest content They started looking directly at people who are creating content on social media. That's the reason why you would see people doing skits and stuff on Instagram or on Facebook or whatever, and then they go directly from just making skits to being able to do television series or doing stand-up comedy shows virtually first, but then being able to actually do comedy shows. Just talking or creating content to going directly there because the market is wide open. These streaming networks need content. So you saw some people who were able to successfully make that transition. You look at people like Desi Banks, Jess Hilarious out of Maryland. These were people who not only had the natural talent and were creating skits or content on social media, but they made that successful transition and they're genuine about it. That's why you see the continuity in what they're doing today, where they have all of these other different type of opportunities because they were real like that to begin with. You take it even further back with Issa Rae, she was doing the same thing using YouTube with the Awkward Black Girl web series that she was doing. She was able to successfully transition that. And you have a lot of people who were able to do that. But then you also have a lot of people that were not able to do it because they weren't really founded when it came to the talent and the work ethic. They weren't really genuine like that. So you just see them create something for a minute and it's like, yo, whatever happened to them? They're not doing no skits. They not, and even if they still doing skits, it's almost like it ran its course. It wasn't sustainable. People who are really genuine, that's really doing this work, have a sense of sustainability that can't be copied or duplicated. So you see people come out and do a few podcasts and then they just don't exist no more. Or they come out and they do this and they don't exist no more. That's because it wasn't really rooted in talent and work ethic. So moving forward, I encourage all of y'all to keep an eye out on how we're seeing the growth of this technological age and its relationship to IP or intellectual property. And if you have ideas, I would encourage you to start doing more research on IPs and intellectual property so that you can come up to speed on how things are advancing, especially around AI or artificial intelligence, so that you can properly position yourself to be able to control your digital destiny. Most people, they just sit on social media and think it's a game. And I come across people's pages and they're very talented in the way in which they use their words or with their comedic insight or even images and stuff that they post with their captions and all of that stuff. Some people are just sitting there doing this for fun, not realizing that you have content producers for various different networks sitting back and that's all they do is scour the internet and social media in order to see what they can use as an idea and as intellectual property, where you get no credit for it, where you can literally transform your life and your circumstances if you realize your real value in this legal landscape when it comes to IP. Most people have no clue and they don't realize their value in that capacity. So I appreciate y'all just taking some time to spend with me tonight. Like I said, I know I'll be on here like that. Sometimes I'll be having certain things on my mind that I just be wanting to share. So, and I'm probably going to delete this right after I'm done. But watch this. Watch, I just threw a pebble in a pond. Watch the ripples that come out of me sharing this video tonight. Where now I'm giving people things to talk about and to consider. Because usually, if I'm not open up, if I'm not building or opening up my mouth talking about certain things, others don't really be talking about nothing. Soon as I open up my mouth, now people want stuff to say. So you can copyright hashtags. There's a difference between copywriting, trademarking, and creating a patent. So Shaborn, I would say do some research on the difference between a trademark, a copyright, and a patent. Copyrights are more for written and visual works of art. A patent is more based upon an invention. A trademark is more based upon a logo or symbol or phrase or something that's going to be used in the public domain. In a commercial sense, or to also protect what that actually means. So, for example, you're not going to see a bunch of people using the golden arches for McDonald's. You ain't going to slap that on those sneakers. You ain't going to put it in a rival's commercial unless you have permission from McDonald's to do that. And here in America in particular, you have to be able to navigate this legal landscape. You have to be able to navigate this legal landscape. And one way that you can successfully do that is to control your IP, control your intellectual property. Do you know that if Kanye did not trademark Ye and you trademark Ye, he could not legally use that? And if he wanted to legally use it, he would have to license Ye from you. So keep an eye out on the development of this artificial intelligence and how this technology is reshaping the legal landscape where we live. I saw Timberland came out and made a statement about how he's going to use AI or artificial intelligence in order to change the landscape around intellectual property or around IP. He publicly said that he's working on being able to do that right now. So it's important for us to be able to position ourselves so that these changes don't continuously just happen around us. Let me share something else. If you can create a whole entire album with Tupac's voice in collaboration with Michael Jackson, if you own and produce that yourself, that's yours. You can monetize that. The legal landscape has not yet clearly defined how to define that intellectual property or IP. That's why people can just create these artistic works utilizing the voice of anybody and own the rights to it. Things are headed in that direction to the point where once this type of technology is going to be utilized in film and television, you, and listen to what I'm telling y'all, you will eventually have the opportunity to stream the Godfather series. Yep. You're eventually going to have the capability of watching the Godfather and changing the voices of the characters. You will have the technology to be able to do that and make Tupac Michael on the Godfather. Put yourself in the Godfather and basically curate your own content using this AI technology. Or if you're watching a Marvel movie or something like that, you can put yourself in that Marvel movie and make yourself Thanos. That technology has that capability where you could just film an entire series and have multiple capabilities of interchanging the actors, changing the background music, and just curating that series whatever way that you want. And that AI technology is going to eventually have that capability of doing that. Now, if you are an actor and you film this television series, the way that that contract may be negotiated is that you just own the rights of what you filmed. In terms of the AI capabilities and a person having the capacity of changing out actors or changing your face and even changing your voice or whatever and streaming that, you may not have any rights to that at all. You just have rights of the same way when you see video games and they have the sensors attached to people and they have them doing dance moves and stuff like that and they use them inside the video games with various different characters. The person who's being used as a template for these dance moves that they put in these video games, they're not getting a percentage off of each character in that video game that's doing those dances. They just got paid to be a template with the green screen behind them and the sensors so that they can use those movements and code it into the game. They just got paid for that. They're not getting paid for every single time that this character comes up in the game doing their dance. Do you understand what I'm talking about right now? We are going into a space that if we are not up on how to position ourselves, we will definitely be written out of the future. Definitely. And a part of it is being able to understand how this legal landscape is changing and how we can control our intellectual property. How do you see this technology though? I mean, you are sharing so to make us aware so we can protect our IP, but would you ever dabble in this to see what you can do and create? I'm already in this, Shabor, so I'm speaking from experience. You have to make the technology work for you, not you working for the technology. Wallow said something real wise one day. He was on IG and he was saying, if you look at society right now, it's revenge of the nerds. This is revenge of the nerds. The people that think about we grew up amongst, if we weren't that segment of the demographic in our schools that you would consider to be nerds. Nerds were bullied, they were looked down upon, they were treated certain type of ways. Now the people who are controlling this AI technology are those same students that people was bullying and looking down upon. The same ones who's buying up hundreds of thousands of acres of farmland in this country, creating this technology that all of us have to rely on. The ones that weren't getting any girls or weren't getting any guys, that weren't on the sports teams or any of that. This is the segment of the population that's controlling the direction that society is going in. So if you noticed, maybe last month or earlier this month, some of the top people that's working in this space signed a petition and strive to talk about regulating the development of this AI technology because they have no control over it. They have no control. So we have to be able to position ourselves and we have to become more educated on how this legal landscape is changing around this artificial intelligence technology. In schools right now, some of the AI technology is being banned. Those, you know, that technology that some of the universities can recognize are being banned because you can have them write in it. You can have some of that AI technology write an entire doctoral dissertation or do papers. Could you imagine a person that goes entirely through medical school using AI technology? Because a lot of it is allowing people to cut corners and to do things which appears to be more efficient, but it lacks the human element to it. So basically, it's cheating. Could you imagine somebody going through medical school cheating and now you're laying on a table waiting for this person to operate on you or for this person to be able to perform some procedure on your family and they use this type of technology to basically uh, shuffle them through medical school or through law school. Could you imagine that? Where people are not really studying like that? Yeah, but that chat GBT4, they have other different forms that universities have not been able to ban because it's just like different strands of the flu. You may create something to stop one strand, but then as soon as you stop that, you got a whole nother strand that came up. That's the way that this AI technology is developing. Universities is banning that one. But these other ones, they don't even know that they exist. So yeah, we got to get up on this. We got to get up on it. We got to get up on it and see how it relates to our IP or our intellectual property. So, all right, I rambled enough. It is going up on damn 2 hours. Shit. So, my Atlantis school logo is trademarked. So nobody can't use that in no capacity. And like I said, those of you who are interested, I would encourage you to start doing some more research on trademarks and copyrights and patents to start getting some greater insight into where we're at right now. We're not in the social media era no more. We're in an IP era. We're in an intellectual property era. I love you too, Shabor. We're in an intellectual property era. And if we're not adapting and we're not up on what's happening, things are just going to pass us right by. So I appreciate y'all tuning in. And I'll be with y'all again soon. Peace.